Welcome to the Win Well podcast series, where we share stories from remarkable people who are learning how to thrive and win well in high performance, high pressure, high risk and high reward environments. I know in each episode I get the opportunity to learn from their experiences to apply to my own life, and I hope you do too. Today's guest is an absolute ray of light, double Olympic gold medalist and Great Britain's most successful Winter Olympian, wife, sister, daughter, mother and executive coach, Lizzy Yarnold. Lizzy generously opens up about the choices and decisions that have shaped her journey, the importance of community, the need to feel part of creating and shaping her own path and performance journey, the people who have helped guide and support her along the way, the impact a broader sense of identity has had on her performance, well-being and career longevity, and how genuine she has had to be to herself, including facing into her worries and vulnerabilities when you truly feel you are there to inspire a generation. You will literally be taken through Lizzy's mental imagery from the start line, every bend and turn, to the finish line of her Olympic gold medal skeleton run, which was a huge honour for me to witness, and now you get to experience it too. So let's begin. Hi, Lizzy. Thank you so much for joining me in today's Win Well podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have you as a guest. Through your journey as an athlete, I've hugely admired what you've achieved as a person as well as a performer. And I've always loved hearing the stories you share. So I know we're going to get a huge amount of insight from today's podcast. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Dawn. And it's really odd to even get my brain into the sporting world. It's not something I usually talk about day to day, so I'm going to allow myself the empathy to talk about skeleton, to talk about that part of me, because it feels as though I need a bit of permission for myself. So thank you for inviting me onto the podcast as well.
Oh, great. I'm so grateful you see that as an opportunity to share that and share those experiences and reflect back to think where you are now and where you want to be in the future as well. So I always start with these podcasts, Lizzy, about asking guests to kind of describe their whole self. So if you wouldn't mind by starting describing your whole self, that would be great.
So my whole self, I'm physically stood at home near Winchester. So I lived in Bath a lot when I was an athlete, which I loved being in Bath. I grew up in North Kent. And I think I sort of fell here by mistake. We were following my husband's career a little bit. I have one husband, I have 3 young daughters, and we're into the school system, the primary school system. So that part of me very much is within my community, within my marriage and my parenthood. And then there's this other part. I'm still a double Olympic champion. It feels as though sometimes, oh, you were an Olympic champion. I feel as though I need to almost correct people. I'm still an Olympic champion. I just have these additional roles in my life now. And essentially, aside from being mum and a wife, I am still Lizzy. And the Lizzy, I suppose, is someone who I love learning. I love different conversations and challenging myself. That definitely fed my love of sport and performance within sport. But now into executive coaching and mentoring, my keynote speaking still that I do, which I love. I enjoy meeting people, being passionate about what I do, actually in a joyful way. And so I love sort of giving the energy and exploring new ideas. But there's absolutely still the Lizzy who I like kind of the quiet and having a bit of peace and to re-energize myself. So yeah, the holistic, it's a big question, Dawn. I went a bit wild there, but
I love that from the geography to being a mother and a wife of one husband. I like
that. I studied geography at university. I refused to give up. I did geography and sport and exercise science. So I think even as a young child, I loved geography lessons where you just got to, colouring in, but shading the edge of the earth and the ocean, realising actually we are just small parts of this whole system, whether being, performance sports or the community, as I mentioned, that's really important within the school system as well. That sense of being within the community and giving to the community, but the world as a planet as well.
Yeah, I love that connection to that whole and those whole parts from geography to being an Olympian and not was in the past sense. I love the fact that you are an Olympian and you are an Olympic medalist, a gold medalist, still our most decorated Winter Olympian, Lizzy.
Maybe not for long, which is exciting.
Yeah.
But we'll go into that, I'm sure.
Can you describe your athletic journey and how you got into skeleton?
So skeleton's one of those really, I call them quite strange, different, interesting, but a bit wild sports. You know, my first questions whenever I meet anyone is, you know, why skeleton and how did you get into it? So, you know, straight away I'm answering, I think I loved skeleton because I was the kid that loved adrenaline, of course. I love risk and doing something challenging. But also the fact that it was kind of the Brits who didn't have our own track. We didn't have opportunity to increase our skill level at home with our home track. We had to learn quickly wherever we were traveling around the world. So it was really, you know, Brits working together as a team against all these other challenges in this winter sports world. So I got into it. It all starts, as it always does, with, you know, how you were brought up within your family. I am very obviously the independent middle child, one of three girls. So Katie and Charlotte, my sisters, I always imagine them next to me when I'm talking about my childhood, but they're both about 6'1". And we all love sport. We had a house on the farm that we grew up on, and the house was in the middle of the garden, like a donut garden goes around the outside. And the path that came towards the house had some lavender growing next to the path. So before dinner, and, you know, most of the time we'd run around this donut running track. Before dinner, Mum would say, okay, Lizzy, you run around 6 times. Katie, you run around 7 times, because that's our ages. So you just got to run around. And you'd use the lavender bushes as the hurdles halfway round at the running track. So sport was a part of our lives, was very much me battling to be better than my older sister Katie and with Charlotte as well. So, you know, athletics was quite a natural progression. When I was 12, 13, watching Denise Lewis, you know, we all have those heroes, that moment that kind of, yeah, just takes over our imagination. And it was Denise Lewis throwing the javelin, and she had her leotard, Team GB, on the chest. She had, I think the leotard was almost one arm uncovered and one arm, yeah, people remember that. And it was so beautiful. And she just stood there, you know, ready to go down the runway. And she looked, you know, powerful. She looked in control of that moment of her own destiny. So I set out to the athletics track, Tunbridge Athletics track, Maidstone, so M&M, and then Ashford as well, up at Bromley and Blackheath. We train everywhere. Every night after school, through secondary school, I loved athletics. And I got to 18, and no one had kind of sent me a letter or presented me with a vest that said, yes, Lizzy, here you go, you're part of the I was going to say club, it almost feels like that, the Team GB club, you know, that belonging. I wasn't good enough. I hadn't sort of cut it. I went to university to study geography and sport and exercise science, which I loved. And I was in the library at Oxtal's campus, and I looked over and it was on my right, this large poster that said, UK Sport Talent Search called Girls for Gold, come along to do the testing day. So in 2008, not too long before, obviously, London 2012, I went to this talent search, and it was all physical testing: height, arm span, sprint speed, power on the bike, you know, ball throws, all that basic info. 1,500 national level athletes between 16 and 25 or something like that. So it's a good group, solid group. Everyone looked like proper athletes. And I did this time get a letter back, and it said, congratulations, you have made it through to the next stage of the skeleton. And I'd never heard of this sport, never seen it. You know, it was on the list, but never, you know, wanted to try it. And the letter came with a DVD of Shelley Rudman, who won silver in 2006 Torino Games. And I watched her on the red sofa doing a bit of skeleton and thought, okay, this is a bit weird, as everyone has that same reaction, you know, what even is this? And then thought, okay, I'll give it a go. I'll see what UK Sport or whoever these people are who think I could be good at it, see what I can do. And that was, that really was the first tiny moment of choice, or of like designing my own future destiny, those mini moments of change.
And then from that point?
Oh my goodness, I'll have a sip of water because I do love to chat. I met Laura Dees actually during that Girls for Gold testing phase. We met at Bath University. We were both 18. And so the 1,500 were cut down to 100. We went to Bath University. I met some sort of friends, met Laura. And the 100 were down to 50, down to 20, down to 10. And they whittled us down to the final group of 10 who had a go on the track in Lillehammer. And again, those kind of moments of choice, stood at the top of the track, or actually it was corner 3, looking into corner 3 of the Lillehammer track and deciding, actually, do I want to do this, or it's okay to leave? You don't have to do it. The first run that I went down, you're holding on with your arms onto the saddle. Your toes are pointed behind you. Your shoulders are down, almost domed slightly because they're trying to contact onto the sled. And your head is looking almost through your eyebrows. You're tilting your chin forward and trying to look at what's coming at you, what's happening next. And the first run, corner 3, corner 4, 5, and at 6, I think I was screaming inside the crash helmet, not knowing where I was, what was going on, or how the hell you stop this thing. Or steer it, Imagine that, you could steer it. I was so full and overwhelmed of fear and the noise, just the overwhelm of the vibrations and the sound. And I got off the sled, spoke to a coach, Danny, and my reaction, there's even a video, he videoed it. How was it, Lizzy? I was like, yeah, I kick corner 6 a bit better, and I can... And I was just saying what I thought he wanted me to say, or what I needed to say to be considered good enough. And I'd smashed my left hand, all my knuckles went sort of that immediate big bruise, very painful because of the cold as well. And I was proud that I'd done that first run, but equally, I never want to do that again. That was like a frightening sensation of lack of control, or just not sport, not like a fun sport, totally alien. We went back to the changing room where all our stuff was at corner 3, and I kind of collapsed onto this wooden bench and had a drink and a breather. And weirdly enough, the other females in the group got up and walked out the door to their second go. And it was a very odd moment that I think I was grateful almost of that group behaviour, of me seeing them, all right, they're going to go for it. And Laura had another go. And I think my feet took me to the sled and had my second attempt. And actually the second, third, fourth attempt were a lot worse than the first, because there's that tipping point of almost knowing what's going to happen. And slowly, maybe by the third day, I realised where the corners were going, what was happening, and understood a small amount of steering. And when I tell the story, I realise actually how overwhelming and worrying, and the anxiety and the adrenaline, everything was going on in my body as a young 18, 19-year-old. It's a lot to contend with. I came back to the UK. I actually went straight to Uganda on a geography trip. So I went from Lillehammer, freezing cold, out to Uganda, which is lovely and warm. So a wild Easter holidays, and got an email. They'd moved on from the letter, and I'd made it through to the talent team. And that's really where the hard graft began, of learning the sport, learning the sled itself, the technology around the sled, learning the tracks. Every track is completely different all around the world, like motorsport racing. And then it was 4 years of grind, really, until the first Winter Olympics that I was selected for in 2014.
And you talk about elements of choice in that, Lizzy. Do I want to do this again? Is this fun? What led you to make the choice you wanted to do that?
There's a memory that sticks with me every season of competing in the skeleton. the Europa Cup team, the Intercontinental Cup team, or the World Cup as I progressed through. Every year I'd come home and, yeah, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted. And one particular year, I was trying to chat to my sister, Katie. We were at our parents' getting ready for a Sunday lunch or something, and I was peeling some green beans, taking the spine off of the green beans. I was trying to look down at the grater, at the peeler, and I was saying, I really hate, I'm exhausted from skeleton. I can't keep doing it. I want to stop. And the tears were running down my eyes, and I almost couldn't see the peeler, and it was all. And she took me over to the sofa and we kind of sat down together. And as a sister does, she kind of just looked at me and said, "Look, Lizzy, all you ever go on about is going to the Olympics. Why are you going to quit now?" And, it's funny, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe that's true. Maybe I didn't realize all I ever talk about or dreamt about was that Olympic experience. It wasn't to win, wasn't to, be on top. It was to call myself an Olympian, to have that Team GB on my chest. So yeah, another moment of choice, I'd say not from myself necessarily. Sometimes it's been from others' helpful direction or reminder. Yeah.
About who you are, what your goals are, what you've striven for, why you're there in the first place.
Exactly.
And then from those choices and from that fear and those moments of pain and suffering and why am I doing this, to then have a wonderful career in the sport, Lizzy. Can you explain a little bit more about what you went then on to achieve?
My first Winter Olympics in Sochi in 2014, it was that golden period of my career where I would work hard and study notes and get better. I'd work more in the gym and I'd lift more and I'd get faster. The hard work was equating to results and success on the track. And we headed out to the Sochi Olympics, and Noelle Piker's pace, my biggest rival at that time, she'd win a World Cup race, I'd be second. I'd win a race, she'd come third. It was tit for tat, really. It was great. It was the rivalry was a wonderful thing. And so going into the race in Sochi, I had Noelle in my mind. I had the ice, the new track in my mind. There was lots sort of going on. But essentially, it was still for the love of the sport, the joy of the sport, and going as quickly as I could down the track. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but it was a case of storming out to the start block, warming up well, being prepared, ticking everything off my list, and I raced really well. The next run, I kind of stormed out to the block. I had in my mind what I was going to do, and I performed well. And I increased the lead. Overnight was half a second, then I increased the lead again for the third run. And so by the fourth run, you add together the scores from all the four runs. I was at 0.97 of a second ahead of Noelle Piker's pace and Elena Nikitina. So that's the largest gap ever achieved in sort of skeleton history. And it was a wonderful event. It was hard graft. I'd committed a lot in my life to be there, but it came good. And to bring home a gold medal was a very wonderful, doing the bus tour around where I grew up in West Kingsdown and Sevenoaks was a wonderful thing. But there was also this question, I suppose, of thinking, okay, I've achieved my childhood ambition. I was 25. Do I now stop, at my peak, and do I sort of bow out gracefully and allow the next athletes to come through? Fortunately, I hadn't yet been world champion, European champion, overall, there was still so much to do, and I could kind of turn my attention to those next goals. And 3 months to the day after the Olympics, the 15th of May, my mum had a lump checked, and we realised that she had breast cancer. She is well now, but to go through, and for my mum to go through that whole medical situation, the procedures, the treatments, was incredibly difficult. It was the first time our family had really touched cancer in such a close proximity. And for an athlete, I was kind of coming home trying to be the Olympic champion and go into as many schools as I could. I was doing sometimes 3-4 school visits a day, and I did Lizzy's school tour and trying to be the athlete, eat the right food at the co-op, make sure I didn't have, a chocolate bar, because people commented on, oh, I didn't think athletes could eat, trying to have an identity that others wanted for me, at the same time as supporting my parents as much as I could, and also having a break. But it was, and I kept going. And the year went past after the Olympics, and I was trying to become world champion, this new goal that I had, which I did achieve. But I almost came back from that world championships so drained, so depleted, and was sort of in a place where I thought, I can't keep going. I can't keep being this Olympic champion or lifting more in the gym. I can't lift anymore. I don't want to keep being 100% all of the time. It's just too much. And I didn't know that you could sort of have a break. I'd not sort of tested out that language or asked for time off.
Yeah.
I went to my end of season review and said to the coaches, not knowing kind of how they'd react. They were all male coaches. They were all quite a bit older than me in that stage of my career. And, having to be bold, it felt I needed to be bold and actually say, I'm exhausted. I'm kind of done with this. I either carry on for another year, try and be world champion again, but I'd probably have to stop, or I need to take a break and come back again for the next Olympics. I can't keep going. And I was very fortunate that they supported me in that break. I got kind of a sabbatical, which I now know in the language of life that it's okay to have a bit of time off, have a break. I'm even stopping myself saying, have a break. So I had that time off, time away, and almost invigorated. If I want to come back for the next Olympics, I've already got the gold. Is there a point in going back for literally the same physical thing again? Or do I maybe need to do things differently? And that was a huge moment when the PL support, I suppose, was absolutely instrumental in kind of that next phase of my career.
So if we explore kind of winning well up to 2014, what did that look like or mean to you in that phase of your career?
Winning well was not kind of a term, it's a much more recent terminology. So I don't have much sort of deep thinking in winning well during my first Olympic cycle, other than I was a young athlete who was very dedicated, very proud to be a Team GB athlete and Olympian. And winning meant doing the best that I could on the track. So I often have 3 goals. It's not about the outcome. I was very much a process-driven athlete anyway. But the 3 goals, corner 6, corner 12, execute the steers, and generally on the track, have good form. I'd aim to have 2 goals achieved and maybe 1 work on for the next day. And that was kind of winning, was in my own mind of improving, that slow progression towards self-improvement. But I didn't necessarily have a wider lens of how to sustain my success within myself as a human being, not only a performer.
And then how did that change then with the insight you'd got through that time, I guess, through challenging times, through your family, supporting your family, seeing, I guess, yourself getting to the point of burnout, and wondering if you can go again. How did that change for the next phase for 2018?
And burnout absolutely is a term that I think I've understood more and would say that that's what I experienced at the time. I think the way that I was almost shocked into realising I'm not just an athlete. After Sochi, I had to be a daughter to support my parents as best I had to be a sister. I needed to be an athlete within the school setting to turn up and inspire kids. There's a way of actually being different in different moments of time. And that kind of shook me in the sense that I could then think, okay, who am I going into my second Olympics? What does that look like? How can I maybe use what I've learned, but try it in a slightly different way? maybe think of it more as an outfit, the athlete mindset as an outfit that I'm putting on, rather than it being my core. So the PL work, I worked with Marcia, which was a huge help because she wasn't my PL from my sport. One of the things I requested on my time off was actually coming into the STV in Bath, where everyone would train, the sports training village. If I came into the building, I would automatically go into performance athlete, 100% all the time mindset. I requested a PL outside of that environment and started working with Marcia up in Bisham, in coffee shops. It was lovely, different Lizzy that I could think about being. And then the good thing about that work was that during the time away from sport, I was able to think, I suppose, a bit more clearly about, why am I coming back into the sport? It's my choice to come back in. I'm giving up my time as well and committing to the next Olympic cycle in the same way that I expect the coaches and other athletes to commit in their own work. I'm committing to being here as well. And by committing, do I have an opportunity to say, can I be a bit more part of the process? Can I bring my own chair to the table of decision making around my training or around which World Cups I'm going to focus on and peak performance during the season? Is there a performance conversation where I can be involved? So that was a real moment of choice, or I don't want to say control in the sense of me being controlling, but me having a sense of impact or participation towards the outcome. I think that was a huge learning that Marcia supported me with massively. I'd love to know her stories on this because I only remember so much. But we did a lot of whiteboard writing and, pages up on the wall, which I enjoyed because, excuse me, when being stood next to a blank sheet of paper and for someone to almost give you the pen and say, well, what do you want it to look like? What does performance or success look like? And I remember writing some ideas, or what, could it be different? What would it be like? Working it out for myself was very empowering to be given the pen,
Which isn't always given to you in lots of different performance environments, for sure.
Exactly.
And what impact did that have in terms of more autonomy, more choice, more an ability, I guess, to control your destiny a little bit further?
Well, it gave me a lot more work, actually. So I think I learned to appreciate, actually, sometimes being the athlete and being given the program of coaching. That's also really great in some situations because you're just doing instead of trying to think and chat to people. But it had a huge impact because what it did, the PL work, it enabled me to go to the coaching team and my support team and have a discussion around, is there a way that I can sort of be in this process or sit within the process slightly differently? One small example of this is I didn't mind working with a nutritionist around mass and reduction of skin folds in relation to muscle mass and therefore power on the track. I was totally bought into the nutrition work. What I started to get kind of worried about is how we were simplified into pure numbers. If you're hitting this number, therefore it's good. So what through chatting with Freddie, my nutritionist at the time, I said, take the skin folds, take the numbers, but I don't need to see those numbers. You can keep them for your data. Once you've taken that information, let's have a conversation around actually, how am I feeling with the nutrition this week? How am I performing? So we'd get that information from the S&C coaches, actually, how am I performing in the gym that week and what's having an impact? So I could feel as though there was a sense of choice in, I know you need the data, that's fine, we can do that, but where do I need the conversation to be focused and for it to feel as though I'm a part of it? I'm bought into it, I suppose. So yeah, being given the pen, being given the focus, yeah, it brought me a lot more work, but it felt as though when I was going to the World Cup events, I'd been a part of the planning process. I was fully bought in and therefore bought into the failure as much as I was the successes, not the outcome results. I'm talking about like the 3 goals. Was this good? What could we improve? It was still very process driven. I try and think about that second Olympics almost being focused around my success being like transcending the gold medal. The gold medal wasn't the outcome. The gold medal's not really enough to do it for, because I already had it. So why would you do it all again for the same outcome? I had to have a different focus.
And then so an element of choice, of decisions, of feeling a part of that process, probably influencing you, probably even greater than the outcome and the medal itself. But then you talked a little bit about taking the suit off, the athlete suit. You know, what did you do to develop yourself holistically during that second Olympic campaign?
I think that almost the few years of maturity just really helped in the way that my relationship was developing with my partner. We got married during that period. I was going to say competing. He was working in the America's Cup. So between the Sochi and the Pyeongchang Olympics, he was based out in Bermuda, and I'd visit him there for the America's Cup with the Ineos team with Ben Ainsley. So life got more complicated, but in a way that was quite a blessing. I had a different focus. I could wear a different outfit, be a supporter instead of being the focus. I did a bookkeeping course as well, which was very helpful, incredibly boring probably to other people, but I really enjoyed it. I did more knitting. I did more things for me. And I suppose with a bit more education, with a bit more of a focus onto other things, you know, the joy of learning for learning's sake. It wasn't only around my performance on the track. It's just almost, I'm doing it with my hand motions. It just sort of gave other layers to my life, so that when I did have a bad performance, and by the way, I came back to sport for the second Olympics and I was awful. Like, I was the worst I'd ever been, and it got worse and worse and worse. But because I had slightly different identities or different layers to my person, to myself, I didn't feel as though all was lost when I performed badly on the track or the results didn't happen. So that was empowering, because there was more to me than just the results.
And I guess why PL expresses that more to me campaign, doesn't it, really, is that this doesn't, winning and losing doesn't define you and enables you to be resilient to go again.
It does. But I mean, what a hard thing to get your head around. I remember when James and I had just started dating before the Sochi Olympics, and I would go to bed pretty much every night, and I would settle into bed and I would cry. And I don't know why. I think maybe that moment in bed where you start thinking or worrying, and I would cry and say, he'd ask, you know, what's wrong? And all I could verbalise is my value as a person dependent on my result on this one day, the 14th of February, 2014. You know it 5 years in advance. Is my whole life and my value dependent on this day? And there's nothing you can really say to someone. You know, everything is driven around that performance. Everything is focused towards that day. Luckily, it went really well. I loved the competition. I performed well and I got the gold medal. But for the second Olympics, I suppose that's what I developed in my thinking, is around, competition. There's 20, 30 competitors. You can't predict what's going to happen. All I could do is focus on myself. In the ice shoot, in the run of the ice track, that's all I focus on. All these other things are going on around me within the race, within life. And to kind of trust and believe within my own process. But it is a difficult thing, I found, to get my head around, that there is more to me or that there is more to my results. I think I almost had to go through that experience. And life, I think, shows me that, when I do fail, people do still love me. They don't think any differently of me, which is a bit wild to an athlete. You think, oh no, it's not gone well. And no one really cares.
In the nicest possible way.
In the nicest way, they don't care. They're like, good job, Lizzy, you tried really hard and it didn't go your way. I'm like, oh my goodness.
It's an amazing insight, Lizzy, because I guess most people assume that athletes are striving for that and wanting that and not crying at night because, is this the only way I define myself? So if you were to speak to yourself now and your younger self, what would you say to them?
Well, yeah, I knew I'd get teary because it is emotional, and I gave myself that permission to be honest with you on this podcast. But I don't know if I'd be much different. If I gave myself the advice, I'd like to say, don't worry, Lizzy, it'll be all right, or, give yourself a break. But would that advice have changed the outcome? It is, being an athlete, it's uncomfortable. You are pushing yourself to the physical limit, to the emotional limit. You will not get better unless you are improving, striving, and pushing yourself. And my nan even said it to me. She used to take me to athletics training. For the 800 meters, I would often throw up. And she would say, why do you always push yourself to the point of throwing up? And I would say, I'm not going to get better unless I'm pushing myself. So to the younger athlete, I think I would literally just say, you'll be all right, or something very useless and unsatisfying.
And then in the lead up to Pyeongchang, you described obviously the illness that you were sort of managing as part of that challenging process. So, what got you to the start line?
Well, I didn't know much about this illness. It was really just happened at the moment. So my results were awful going into the Olympic season. I tried to kind of claw my way up the results ladder, and I just about got the GB number 2 spot on the team behind Laura Dees, who I mentioned from Girls for Gold. So she was GB number 1, performing the best in the team. I was GB number 2, reigning champion, but scraped through. But full of positivity, full of, this is my plan. I've been a part of it. We can do this. I felt empowered, but it's not quite good enough. So I went out, we were in Pyeongchang, beautiful country, loved it there, but it was -20. So as a winter athlete, I don't mind -5, don't mind -10, but -20 is a whole different game. The cold air comes into your lungs, you can kind of feel it crackling, your eyelashes will freeze, and yeah, it's a bit different. The ice is different on the runners. So we're getting ready for the race. As I said, it's 2 days of competition, 2 runs each day, and you add together the whole time. And the first day of competition, Laura and I went to the gym. We were lifting weights with our coach, Ed, getting on the bikes, getting warmed up. And on the bike, I started coughing and, really coughing, and coughed into my right hand 2 huge lumps of yellow, hard phlegm. And all I could think was, today's the Olympics. I'm just going to pop those into my pocket for later, deal with that later, and kind of just move on. We headed up to the track. I got my skeleton suit on. So these are very tight, aerodynamic suits. You have the bib over the top. Everything's very much in place for traveling at 90 miles an hour down the track. And I, stormed down to the start block of the run. And Eric was there with the sled. And I took the sled from him. You got the green light, bent down to the ice, rocked back into the start block, and exploded with that sprint start. 16 strides over the brow, jump onto the sled and into position, shoulders down onto the sled. And I faced the first few corners okay, and then realised that I couldn't breathe. I hadn't breathed on the running parts, and I couldn't really breathe very well on the track. My chest couldn't get the air in. I also had a vestibular issue, which I had been suffering from for a few years, but not at that track. Every track is different, and it was fine in Pyeongchang. Halfway down the track, the vestibular issue kicked in, and I was immediately unaware of where I was in the track. It's completely disorientating, confusing. I can't steer. I don't know where I am, so I can't therefore steer anything. And I'm holding onto the saddle just to kind of ragdoll my way to the bottom of the track. So I stopped the sled, and the manager, Jen, came and helped. She knew what was wrong with me. She'd seen it before, and she came to help me kind of stand up and walk. I wasn't able to walk unaided. And as I'm trying to communicate with Jen, but not let anyone hear, it's happened. I can't see very well. Can you help me? And the BBC microphones had picked all this conversation up because they were lined along the track. And so I went in the truck back to the top of the track, and ran to the bathroom where I was sort of over the sink. When you're disorientated, I kind of wanted to throw up into the sink to stop that feeling of sickness, but also stop myself, and complete confusion, washing my wrists and splashing my face. And the physio, Louise, came in. She said, "Lizzy, you okay? You okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay. I hate skeleton. I'm never doing it again. I can't do it." And she said, "If you could go again, Lizzy, it would be quite good because you are good at it." I was leading the race somehow, and Louise magically just cut through my sadness or my kind of despair, and I wasn't well in my chest, but there was another run on the track to do. So we did all the medical checks. I wore a slightly looser suit from training, so I had more room over my chest to breathe. And I went down the track for the second time. And I went from first place, I think, to ninth. It was a stark difference. I was just trying to stay in the race, not to compete anymore, but to enjoy it, stay in the race. And the next morning for day 2 of the race, I was straight at the doctor's door, 7 o'clock in the morning, knocking on the door. And I asked him just to look at my chest, to listen to the air. I just can't breathe. I can't get anything in. And he listened to the chest, and I don't see this often, but a doctor, and he just sat in his chair and leant back. And he said, "Lizzy, you've got a really, really bad chest infection, and there's nothing that I can do for you now, but you've got 2 runs left, and I think you can do it." And I was like, he just took his time, and I believed him, and that power of the doctor's role, that the knowledge and the "it's going to be okay" message, I think. So of course I couldn't tell Laura, my closest teammate. She'd been my bridesmaid, I'd been her bridesmaid. There's no way I'm telling Laura, one of my biggest rivals, that I've now got a chest infection. So we changed my warm-up, less movement, more oxygen to reduce the lactic acid build-up, and didn't really tell anyone. You don't want to tell your rivals, the media, anyone else. So for the run 3, I did another kind of just stay in the race run down the track, and I moved from 9th place up to 2nd, and there was 0.02 of a second between myself and Janine Flock, the Austrian, who was also very good. And again, storming out to the start block on the 4th and final run, all I could think was just, run as fast as you can on the start block, the process from corner 1 to corner 2. And you're stood at the start block, and it's -20, it feels cold within your body. And you have your salopettes up tight, you have your jacket up tight to keep the warmth inside the muscles. And the countdown clock, kind of 30 seconds to go, and I put my crash helmet on, clicked into place. Breathe. 15 seconds. Salopettes off, fling them in someone's face. Jacket off, fling them in someone's face. Look for the green light. And I took my sled from Eric, rocked back onto the block, and run. 10, 12, 16 strides, jump onto the sled, into position, shoulders down. Look for corner 1. Corner 1, smooth. Corner 2, control it, wait, control the second oscillation. Into 3, tap just before control. Look for 4, control, tap before 4, control 1 oscillation, wait. Into 5, smooth, control, wait. 6, 7, look for the chicane, be patient, wait. 12, high oscillation, control it. Second oscillation, look. And I came through the finish line, and I saw the downtime, and I knew it was okay. And I saw the finish position, and it said number 1. So I knew I'd at least got the gold from Sochi, and I had at least a silver from Pyeongchang. And my brain literally went, well, Jessica Ennis-Hill, she got a gold and a silver, so that's pretty good. Yes. I was still a heptathlete in my heart. That's really good. And And I stopped the sled, got off the sled, and stood at the next to the track. There was Laura. She was waiting for me to come down, and we were both looking at this tiny screen. Janine Flock still had to go down the track. She was at the top of the hill. You could hear them cheering, run and jump onto the sled, and you can kind of hear her coming down. We're watching the screen, and it goes from green to red, and she's making mistakes. She's skidding, hitting, and I'm realizing, okay, this could be my chance. It could be a gold. And then as Janine drops more time, Laura and I are starting to realize she was in bronze. No, she was in 4th place at that time. Could she potentially move to bronze if Janine dropped? And all this maths is going on. We're trying to work out, could we do it? No idea what's happening. And Janine comes through the finish line next to us. And Laura's dad, Ewan, shouts out, "Laura, you've done it." And we realised, we turned to each other and jumped up in the air and just shouted past each other. She'd won her bronze, I'd won my gold medal. And, you know, we'd achieved it together. That was very meaningful and very different to the gold 4 years ago. And I think one of the first things I said to her was, make sure you write in your shoes, your spikes, you know, these are your Olympic spikes because you'll keep these forever. I didn't write in mine. I think I lost my shoes because I was so excited. I just kept screaming in happiness. But yeah, that was, Dawn, I don't know what the question was initially, but that's what happened. Yeah.
I was there with you. I was living every moment with you. How do you explaining the turns, and I can see your body moving with it, and every element of that race is still physically and mentally within you. How does it feel kind of going back to that point?
It's a nice memory because I know what happens. You know, it comes good in the end, and I'm stood on the podium with Laura. It was it was all worth it in the end. But if I go back, I remember sitting on the bike and coughing up that phlegm. And, you know, it's a pretty grim place to be when I'd worked for years for that date in the diary. Always 14th of February, always Valentine's Day. You know, 2018, that was the focus. You work hard to lift more, to run quicker, to learn better, and not get ill. That's always a really important thing. Christmas time is tricky. We didn't see anyone at Christmas because I didn't want to pick up an illness, and yet I was still ill. So I think what it reminds me is that, you know, essentially we're all just human beings. You can plan, and it's all about the athlete. Control what you can control. But when it comes down to it, things are going to go wrong. We're all human beings, and it's almost accepting that, like, there are going to be those mistakes on the track. It's about looking forward down the track at the next corner and not overthinking or over-remembering all the things I've not got quite right.
Yeah.
So in terms of just taking the skeleton sliding analogy into life, just, you know, there will be things that don't go to plan. Just keep moving forward. Yeah.
And then having reflections then on what happened post Sochi and doing the school visits and what's expected of you and the media requirements and getting to that point where, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I can carry on like this. What was the next phase beyond Pyeongchang for you?
It was way worse, Dawn. Unfortunately, I feel like the question is, what did you learn from Sochi that you did better? It was worse. So this is a long story. I'll make it short for you. But I in the summer before Pyeongchang, so you do normal summer training in Bath at the STV. I went in one day and my knee had kind of really bruised up and blown up, basically. I tried to use the roller to squish out any kind of inflammation or whatever was going on. I asked the physio, Louise, so can you just quickly look, I can't bend my knee, something's up, I don't know. She booked me an appointment with the doctor, who luckily was a very young, newly qualified doctor who forwarded me on to the knee surgeon. So I popped over to the knee surgeon, and this is something which I never told the skeleton team. So I'm telling you now something which I don't talk about even years after the fact. So I found out that I had a lump in my knee. We didn't know if it was cancerous or not. And he said, oh, it's got really nice clean edges. And I was like, okay, this is an odd sort of fact to tell me. That if it was lots of lumps or broken up, you'd have to stop doing physical exercise because it would spread. And I said to him, I do sport for a job. I've got the Olympics in February. Like, I need to keep doing exercise. And I basically got him to agree that I would definitely come back for an operation 2 weeks after the Olympics. He made me book it in, and he made me promise that I would come, but that I could carry on under the supervision of my physio and my doctor. If all being well, we would do the operation after. So I'd got through this cold in Pyeongchang. We'd won gold. We'd achieved something amazing. And then I had this knee operation that I'd promised to have booked in. I didn't know what sort of lump it was. And with my history, I think, of my mum being unwell, I think that probably was part of the reason I decided to purposefully not share it with the outer team. I couldn't, I suppose, deal with the extra expectation or complex issue, really. The complexity was too much. So I had the operation, and high on pain medication, I emailed the whole of the support team that were really close and important to me. I said, guys, I've had this knee operation. Everything's gone really well. Everything was fine. It wasn't cancerous, Thank you so much, guys. I just want to share this with you. And I attached 2 pictures of this lump to the email. And Marcia replied to the email saying, great news, Lizzy, but you should have put a trigger warning on this email. The pictures are horrendous. So I thought, oh yeah, I probably should have, I love that kind of detail and the gruesomeness, but not everyone does. So we had the knee operation, all was going well, but being on crutches to support my knee, my bad back, which had been bad every year, went from bad to catastrophically bad. And so then I was in a situation where I couldn't really rehab my knee. My back was causing me so many issues with 2 slip discs that I was on constant heavy pain medication and still committed to my school visits. And I really recall the strong memory of going to school visits and needing to have them. I needed to turn up, do the visit, and have left within 4 hours because I didn't want the children seeing me taking pain medication. I didn't know what was going to make me teary today. But unfortunately, I had a back operation, which went well, and I retired from sport. But yes, trying to be the Olympic champion through the realities of what it actually takes is difficult sometimes to share.
Thank you for sharing it here today, Lizzy. What emotions does that spark in you?
I think it's, it's really the care and the vulnerability in front of people that we're trying to inspire, and being the Olympic champion in the way that it is a wonderful movement of Olympic sports and life, and being an athlete is a wonderful thing. But there is a reality that we are pushing ourselves to the performance limit, physically, emotionally, mentally, and causing potential burnout and requiring operations. I was very well supported and looked after, and I've recovered really well. But I think the emotions are that, going into schools and speaking to children, it's a really important part of sport, I think, to be honest, and actually not to always be the shiny role model that we sometimes feel that we need to be, but to be authentic is even more important.
To show humility and vulnerability, and that we learn from failing, and that life isn't a smooth path always.
Yeah, absolutely.
And taking all of those experiences you've had during your career, Lizzy, and managing that transition beyond skeleton, what did that look like for you?
PL provided such a wonderful space where it was away from the performance conversation. I can be Lizzy who's interested in bookkeeping or knitting. It didn't have to say the right things. Or so what I wanted to do after I retired was actually be that person, that conversation of confidentiality and exploration for people within business. I asked Marcia, who trains you guys? What does this job description look like? And realised it was Jenny Rogers who trains many executive coaches. So I went to study where she taught at the Guildhall of Dance and Drama in London. And I'm level 7 qualified with executive coaching and mentoring. So now I work with business people, executive level, as their conversation outside of the business world, outside of their executive teams. So we can explore, I'm the coach, they as the coachee, we almost walk together side by side and walk through what's the challenge, what's the issue, what are the options. And I love being the teammate to support them, because sometimes it can be a bit lonely within our lives, within work. We don't always have someone to care for us, to be dedicated within this challenge, within this conversation. That's what I loved in sport, that people were committed with me to this goal 3 years, 4 years ahead. In life, I think executive coaching can provide a really wonderful space for people to explore their challenges or just work things out for themselves.
And through those sporting experiences, what sort of skills, experiences, behaviours have sort of served you well in this next phase in your life?
I would love to say some beautifully crafted answers that being an athlete has given me. It's to be fair, it's given me a physical awareness. So when I go to the physio now and say, my calves are really tight, and yes, I probably should have been stretching and doing more swimming. I have great physical awareness, and I can spot an Achilles injury way off if someone walks towards me. But, sometimes the athlete mindset isn't helpful in my current life. So I will always answer with things I haven't done or could do better first before I say all the things that it's helped. It's literally happened in this answer with me thinking all the negatives before the positives. So, the athlete mindset, always striving for betterment, or being kind of not negative, but looking for improvement before positivity. Those are things that haven't really helped me. But actually, if I flip it on its head, I love learning and I have a joy of learning. So actually self-betterment has helped me in my executive coaching in gaining or looking for peer support and a community within my current role is something I definitely learned from sport, because community and sharing made me better at what I do and makes others better. So that's kind of everyone supporting each other, lifting that platform, I suppose, of success. Yeah. And I should probably go to the gym more. That's what I learned in the elite world is I do love physical movement and exercise, but I still haven't gone back to the gym properly. I couldn't wait to retire to never go back to the gym. But actually, yeah, I should probably listen to my athlete self and head back to the gym once in a while.
I've spoken to a number of athletes kind of say, it's hard to know ultimately what do you do in the gym when you kind of prescribed, I guess, a gym program that leads towards a goal and an aim and ambition. Then why are you in the gym now, I guess, is sometimes a question athletes sort of ask themselves.
The only thing I do is I go on every single machine in the gym. I love just working out, what is this? What's it even do? And I'll just have a go instead of doing anything productive or useful. Yeah.
And if you were to speak to other people as you do now as an executive coach in high performance, high pressure environments, if you were to give them the space and grace to develop their whole self, what would you say to them?
So when I work with people in the executive coaching space, I think my natural tendency is actually to celebrate what people do really well naturally. There are being in the positions that they are in. You've got to be good, you've got to be switched on, you've got to be passionate about what you do. So making sure that we're being self-aware to the things we are doing really well, where our interest lies, how we communicate with other people really well, before we then move on to other things that we might want to change or alter or think about. I would always just encourage people to have faith in themselves as well, within like their gut or their instincts or where they want somewhere to go, believe in themselves, and be bold enough to communicate with other people in a vulnerable way. I'm not sure, what should we do about this project? I kind of think this, but what's your idea? Be willing to talk to people. And then the third thing, so first being self-aware and being positive about yourself. Second, communicate. And I've forgotten the third already. Oh, there we go. Let's come back. And being open to challenge and change. In sport, I got very good because I was open to, changing things or taking other people's ideas on. So I would do the same. If they've got an idea about a project, actually listen, see whether you can adapt and change, be open to learning.
And if you were with someone who was a little unsure if they needed executive coaching or not, what would you say were some of the benefits of engaging with an executive coach?
I would say that everyone needs a coach, but or a mentor. So mentors are a bit different, where they might give advice or share their lived experience. But I think what's powerful about coaching is that it's a trusted space where you can think, you have time to think. There isn't judgment. I don't mind, where the conversation goes, but it's a space where you can work out where you want to go next and how you're going to achieve it. And the coach is the supporter. They will champion you and support you along that journey. It's all about investing in yourself and believing in yourself. Absolutely.
And performance lifestyle, exec coaching, life coaching are facilitators and enablers to raise those things to the surface, really, I think, always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do often ponder how different my life would have been without those trusted conversations that I had through PL, because I don't think I would have had the confidence to be bold and be brave like I did in sport without the support of others. And them supporting me in my thinking. The ownership really was on that I was working it out, that someone's not doing it for you. You're empowering and encouraging someone else. And that really made a huge impact on my career.
And if you were kind to the whole Lizzy and the whole self about what you've achieved as an athlete, as an exec coach, as a mother, as a wife, how would you summarise how amazing you are as a person?
Oh, I'm just the best. I'd say go and have a twirl. So Laura and I would always, in the early days, we'd have a big cup of tea. Laura, if you're listening, and we'd go and have a twirl. No, I think sometimes it's funny because I respond in a humorous, undercutting manner. But yeah, we should be celebrating those small wins. So I try now to do those 3 goals in a day. What am I trying to achieve? What's something else? And it's okay if I don't do those 3. Reflecting by myself, what's gone well, what can improve, and be quick on that cycle of plan, do, reflect, review. So yeah, I think I always love just having a break, having a cup of tea. Maybe I'll get a twirl later. Yeah.
A time for reflection, a time for expressing, I guess, the great things you've done, the things you could do better, while celebrating with a twirl.
Exactly. And by the way, haven't twirls got a lot smaller than they used to be? What a shame. But yes, I think reflection is so important, and I'm always reminding myself to do a bit more. Yes. Thank you for the reminder, Dawn.
There we go. We need Well, thank you so much, Lizzy, for your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability with me and the listeners today. I really do value what you shared and sharing it in a way that others can learn from your experiences. And hearing how you've grown and developed along your life and your career is so rewarding for us to connect with. And thank you so much for sharing it with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you for listening to the Win Well podcast series. If you'd like any further information on how we can help you and your team to win well through performance lifestyle coaching, mentoring, training, consultancy and recruitment, please visit www.winwell.org.uk. And for public speaking or executive coaching opportunities through Lizzy, please visit www.lizzyyarnold.com. Many thanks.